Hello and welcome to all of you. My name is Larry Romero and I serve as the Product Marketing Manager at CPP for both the MBTI and the Strong Interest Inventory assessments. CPP is a global publisher and provider of innovative products and services supporting individual, team, and organizational development. In addition to the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator and the Strong Interest Inventory tools, CPP's assessment portfolio includes the Thomas Kilmann Conflict Mode Instrument, the FIRO-B, and the CPI 260 assessments, all of which can supplement one another for better addressing your needs. Thank you today for joining us for today's webinar, Realizing the Value of 360s and Incorporating Them into Your Organization. The format for our session is set up so that the presentation will take approximately 45 minutes, allowing 15 minutes to address your questions immediately after. Please submit your questions via the questions box on the right side of your screen. Questions can be submitted throughout the session and we will do our best to address as many as possible. A copy of the slide deck will be sent to all attendees. In addition, a recording of today's webinar will be posted to cpp.com. Now let's get started. Today's speakers are Pamela Valencia and Kevin Jenison. Pamela Valencia is a leader and team development consultant and assessment expert. For more than 15 years, Pamela has partnered with senior and mid-level managers to design and implement customized training programs aimed at elevating skills and knowledge, team cohesiveness, and effectiveness of leaders. Her expertise includes instructional design, stand-up training, program development, train-the-trainer sessions, and team-building strategies. Our next speaker, Kevin Jenison, is a leadership consultant with Pfeiffer, a Wiley Brand. In this role, he serves as an organizational development liaison on the Leadership Challenge and Leadership Practices Inventory with clients such as FedEx Ground, Saks Fifth Avenue, Mercy Hospital, and Federal Exchange Bank, among others. Kevin holds a bachelor's degree in communication studies from Eastern Illinois University and is currently working towards a master's of social work and mental health through Indiana University. With much excitement, I now present to all of you our hosts, Pamela and Kevin. Welcome, Pam and Kevin.
Thank you, Larry. Glad to be here. Let's go ahead and get started first with our agenda of what we're planning on covering today. We're going to go over the benefits of a 360, some implementation suggestions in bringing the 360 into an organization, linking a 360 to organizational models, and we'll cover some case studies, as well as at the very end of the session, combining the LPI 360 and the Myers-Briggs assessments together. So let's get started with talking about first what a 360-degree assessment is. Well, as you know, 360 degrees is that complete circle. And looking on the screen, you'll notice that the leader is the center of that 360 degrees. So they're going to get feedback first from themselves. They'll do a self-assessment. They'll get feedback from direct reports, peers, and managers. So they're getting a complete 360 on how they're doing. And one of the reasons why that feedback is so important is that the best leaders, first of all, they want to know how they're doing. Am I doing great? Am I doing not so great? And how can I improve? Because they truly seek to be the best at what they do. And additionally, multiple perspectives allow for a more complete portrait of where there is that consistency, where those strengths are, and where those opportunities for improvement lie. And a lot of times when I am actually debriefing a self-assessment, I will hear that, oh, I just received that feedback from a 360. So then they begin to become more open to the coaching process itself. 360-degree evaluation results are used to provide information on exactly what path to specifically guide their development needs. And you'll notice a couple of quotes on here on how important when it comes to development models from Burson Associates and Aberdeen Group about our research firms, about how that development, how important it is going forward. You'll notice that 52% of best-in-class organizations create those targeted development plans based on assessment results. And I also added this quote just so that when we're talking about leadership development, we're talking about everyone in the organization. So if you influence people, you are in that leadership role. Okay. Another reason why 360-degree feedback is so important is truly about leadership effectiveness. It's about influence and relationships, not just the relationship between the manager and the employee. Because as you'll note on the screen, a manager's view is less predictive of leadership effectiveness than those of peers and direct reports. Additionally, the benefits of a 360 assessment, and Kevin, would you like to step in here?
Sure. Thanks, Pam.
Mm-hmm.
So with a 360 assessment, you're really looking to get a full range of feedback, more so than just, a leader assessing themselves and then, maybe getting a manager feedback. You want to increase it to where you're getting, your coworkers, your direct reports, and even people outside of your normative teams to really understand how you're exhibiting whatever you're assessing in a right sense. And so here we're looking at the 360 assessment and creating high-performing teams. And with that being teams that continually look to get this feedback from each other and from their managers can tend to work better and to feel better about their development and go forward with that. It generates increased customer satisfaction levels. If you got employees who are continually developing themselves and looking for that 360 feedback, there's a higher chance that they're going to be a little nicer to the customers and feel better about what they're doing, in turn getting that customer satisfaction level. And fostering renewed loyalty and greater organizational commitment. If an employee feels that you're developing with them and helping them develop themselves, especially in the 360 role where they're getting their manager's feedback, they're working with their team, they're looking a little bit outside their team, and they're understanding that you're believing in what they can do and how they can do that with you, that kind of all encompasses the 360 feedback.
Thanks, Kevin. And then we want to ensure a successful organizational-wide implementation when it comes to a 360. So what are some ideas about how you can do that? Here are some 360 assessment do's. And we're going to go over this list, and there's 2 slides. And then we'll go deeper into each item on the list. The first is choosing an assessment that has strong validity and reliability. And the second is ensuring that the 360 observers are anonymous. Enlisting senior management into the program, and then training coaches, raters, observers on the system, as well as their coaching expectations. Additionally, mapping out timeframes and making sure that those expectations are realistic. And, of course, using a 1-year time frame or a time frame to reassess so you can see those changes in behavior and development. And linking the 360 to organizational models and other measurements so that you have that measurement level and connection. We'll talk more about that in just a bit. Okay. So first things first, we want to talk about reliability and validity. Kevin?
Sure. So with the LPI, we pride our 360 very strongly on the fact that it is founded in some very good research and statistics. It was developed through a combination of qualitative and quantitative research methods around 30 years ago, focusing on the personal best leadership, asking leaders what are they doing when they're at their personal best. And from this, our authors Jim and Barry generated the framework for what we'll talk about in a little bit, which are the 5 practices of exemplary leadership. Now, with the LPI being devised around 30 behavioral statements that break out into the 5 practices, they looked at how could we make this work. So it started out in a 5-point Likert scale, and in 1999 moved it to a 10-point Likert scale with 30 behavioral statements, and it's continually being evaluated. Every year Our authors look at the data that we receive from those who take it, the leaders, the observers. They're measuring to make sure that the leadership trends are continually being measured, that we're putting out what are the right leadership frequencies, and that we're measuring the right tools.
A second point is that it's really important to have trust when you're bringing a 360 assessment into an organization. Personally, can anyone go into the system and look up who specifically made a particular statement? I've actually been in organizations where this has happened. So some employees may have a fear of retaliation in that sense. And this is one of the great points about the LPI 360 specifically. Kevin, I think you told me before that people have offered to bribe to get that information.
Yeah, sometimes you know, it's very, common for someone to think that if they're doing a 360 assessment, getting the feedback, they might think, well, if I actually know what Jill said about me or Lisa said about me, then I can develop even further, right? That just, they think that 2 + 2 = 4. But the way that this works is that once you wipe away the anonymous factor, you're taking away the secure feeling that this feedback being anonymous. So by keeping it all anonymous, aside from the manager's feedback, you're letting your participants know that they can feel secure to give that feedback. And it's a little bit added bonus in the sense that this is frequency-based. It's not, I think that, Christine's a bad leader, or I think that Rich is a great leader. It's, what do these frequencies look like with this leader? And so we think that that's strongly related to the anonymous factor. And quite frankly, if someone wants to ask me that, they can try all they want, but unfortunately we can't. I don't even have access to that. That's something that we can't even do. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Another component for that successful implementation is educating staff. It's really important to know that staff is going to need to know how to work the system. It's not simply a link that is sent and they fill out questions. They need to actually know how to go in and choose raters and observers. There'll also be educational needs around the philosophy. Why are we as an organization bringing this assessment in? What are the expectations? Additionally, providing feedback is going to require a little bit of training as well. So who's going to provide the feedback session? And what kind of training will they get on how to do that? Additionally, leaders and managers will need to know what, how, why, when, and where when it comes to the program. So making sure that's in place prior to actually rolling out the 360 assessment will be important. And I do have this strong belief, and I believe you do as well, Kevin, that it's really important to enlist senior management first, if at all possible, because that trickle-down effect is important. Chances are people are looking to see how this 360 degree will be received, how it's being talked about. So bringing leaders in together to provide an open forum that engages them in that group conversation first and foremost often sets the tone. And it works well when you're able to provide some real-life examples of current challenges within the organization or within the team itself, where the 360 can enhance some of those skills and how you can move forward and do better with those enhanced skills. So the big question is, what impact will this have on the organization, on the employees, and on the business? So making sure you have that answer on hand. Okay. And of course, when you are enlisting this meeting, determine the type of meeting. Hopefully you can get in all the key executives, or maybe you start off with a smaller group and have a session with departments. Outlining specific goals and objectives for the 360 and what you want to accomplish or what the organization truly hopes to accomplish. And if you are a consultant, I would begin mapping or becoming familiar with the company's mission, vision, values, and then mapping them to that 360 assessment, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. And of course, just like we mentioned, establish the credibility with the research and the validity of the tool itself. Make sure you can provide those facts. And here are some sample questions to ask when you or we do. What kind of things do we currently do to actively encourage leadership behavior? You know, what are some specific business challenges we are facing? And possibly could be missed if we don't have that leader-rich workforce. Additionally, if this initiative is effective, what will be different? So in a sense, you're already setting the tone and the vision for what you want to accomplish. And if this initiative is not launched and people continue to operate as they do now, what would be the cost to the organization? Okay. So now let's get a little bit specific when it comes to linking 360s to organizational models and other measures. And what we're talking about specifically are mission, vision, and values, organizational goals, development programs, appraisals, and competency. So with that in mind, we're going to get a little bit more specific when it comes to the leadership practices inventory. And we're going to talk about the 5 practices.
Yeah, so I thought it would be good. We had just maybe a brief introduction to what these 5 practices of exemplary leadership are. It's something that I talked a little bit about when I talked about the 30 years of research, and they're asking leaders what their personal best was. And so through that, we have the 5 practices. And the first being model the way. And that's all about clarifying values by finding your voice and affirming shared ideals, and by setting the example by aligning your actions with shared values. The second one we have is inspire a shared vision. And that's about envisioning the future by imagining exciting possibilities together and enlisting others in a common vision by appealing to shared aspirations. Challenge the process being the third one. It's a way to search for opportunities by seizing the initiative and looking outward for innovative ways to improve, and by experimenting and taking risks to constantly generate small wins and learning from experience. Our fourth one, enable others to act. It's about fostering collaboration and building trust and facilitating those relationships between your manager, between your coworkers, and those else you work with. And by strengthening others by increasing your self-determination and developing competence. And last, but not certainly least, because it's a big one, is encourage the heart. It's recognizing the contributions by showing appreciation for individual excellence across the board, whether it be you up to your manager, coworkers to each other, or down the chain. And by celebrating the values and victories by creating that spirit of community that you can get with the 360.
Excellent. And here is a sample of hospital attributes so that you can see how they have mapped out some of the leadership attributes or what they're striving to accomplish in the organization. The first one, lives the mission, lives out commitment to the mission and values. Second one, cultivates the experience. Third, innovates and implements. Fourth, champions change. Fifth, engages others. And sixth, grows talent. So each one of these has information about it and some of the key concepts. And these can be mapped together when you look at the 360 or the LPI specifically, the LPI 360 specifically. Okay, so it has been mapped together as model the way and live the hospital values. Inspire a shared vision links up to champions change. Challenge the process, innovates and implements. Encourage the heart, engages others. And enables others to act falls into growing others. So with that in mind, as you're working with these competencies, you'll be able to see how each one of these links together. And whatever organizational competency, you will find a way to map them together. For example, cultivate the experience. Here are the specifics. Exemplifies servant leadership. Okay? And what does that mean? Engages and listens to those who serve, improves processes from the perspective of those served, linking that up to model the way. Follows through on promises and commitments, sets a personal example of what he or she expects from others, and spends time and energy making certain that people he or she works with adhere to those principles and standards they've agreed upon. So again, you will find these leadership values in most organizations based upon, just like Kevin mentioned earlier, about the research that has been done when it comes to the LPI 360. And I want to share something that I picked up from the LPI 360 Facilitator's Guide, is that it takes practice, deliberate practice. When it comes to coaching and assisting others to develop, it doesn't mean that we need to be perfect. It just means that we can coach and assist others to deliberately practice in becoming the leader they want to become. Okay? So what truly differentiates the expert is a rough metric here, about 10,000 hours of practice over a period of 10 years, 2.7 hours a day. And we don't want to throw anyone off with that, but at the same time, this is something that is achievable. And now, just to kind of put it into perspective, we have a couple of case studies we're going to share with you.
So Brooks Rehabilitation is a pretty good example of taking a 360 and what you can do with it. For those unfamiliar, Brooks Rehabilitation is one of the largest inpatient rehabilitation hospitals in the United States, and they're down in Florida, and in that region, they're one of the largest home health care agencies down there in the southwest or southeast. And about 12 years ago, they faced a big challenge in needing to keep their culture moving forward as they expanded their business to meet the changing needs of the profession. And they began by forming a 12-week program that incorporated their company goals along with 360-degree feedback, as well as ongoing coaching sessions, and having learners take that learning back to the work and putting those actions into place. And after a number of cycles through this program and getting that 360 feedback, which included about 200 people overall, they took an employee engagement survey for their industry that they do annually anyway, and they came back and ranked them in the 91st percentile, ranking them out of 125 industry samples. They ranked 121 above all those 125. So some pretty exciting stuff with them. Our next one is Trustmark. They're up in Chicago, just north of Chicago. They are an employee benefits and health insurance company with over 6,000 employees and about 25 locations nationwide, actually. They're known for their customer service and have been for decades, and their ability to build partnerships with their clients. But kind of like Brooks Rehab, the ever-changing nature and environment of their business meant they needed a culture shift. And they started what they called the Trustmark Renaissance, which they saw starting with looking at their employee mindset and how can we shift that. So they decided, kind of like you were talking about a little earlier, Pamela, on the executive side, they decided that they really needed to get that buy-in from the top down. And so they worked by having a group of senior leaders go through a full program with 360-degree feedback and modeling the way. And by working that mindset through the company and using a continual approach to feedback and involving all levels of employees in the success of their own development, they've become a culture and company that's living proof that values and 360-degree feedback matters, and that developing leaders at all levels from the top to down is an extremely effective path to change.
I love that. It matters. Thank you.
It does, yes.
Excellent. All right. So now just connecting a 360 with the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, just to give you an example of how you can do that as well. The LPI 360, as Kevin has been sharing with you, provides leaders with valuable feedback from managers, coworkers, direct reports, and it helps them to gain that insight in not only how they're viewing themselves, but how others are viewing them as well. Okay? So that's part of what we really talk about with the Myers-Briggs, is having that self-awareness as a foundation for the development process. And what we've done here at CPP and in conjunction with the Leadership Challenge is that we've combined it or done the work for you in essence, where the first step is to take the LPI online, the 360, and getting that feedback. And then step 2 would be to complete the MBTI Complete online as well. And what happens when you do both of these assessments together is that you get a leadership plus report, which assists you in putting both together in a way that's really understandable for the employee. So it provides that MBTI type description, your leadership style, and then it will combine the MBTI assessment with the leadership practices inventory. In a sense that as you work with type description, ENFPs with others, ENFPs at work, and that's our example here, potential blind spots. So you'll get that information about how their personality type leads to those preferences and how they tend to show up at work, as well as a focus on how those feed into their leadership style when it comes to setting direction and inspiring others to follow. It also provides a little bit of a stretch goal for them because ENFPs will have certain strengths and tendencies, and when it comes to a stretch goal, it is maybe going outside of that comfort zone to be more of a leader in a sense that you want to be able to flex your style. Okay. We'll talk more about that. So what it does when it combines the preferences and practices together, you'll see an example under each of the preferences. So as Kevin was talking about the 5 practices, the first one, model the way. This is how extroverted leaders tend to model the way and how introverted leaders tend to model the way. And what we're looking at here is that depending upon the environment, depending upon the leadership skills needed, you want to be able to flex your style and go from perhaps your strength as extroverted leader, sharing ideas and thoughts. Well, are you naturally leading by example? Are you allowing others to express their thoughts as well? Okay, so you'll notice the introverted leader quietly conveying expectations, working to share their vision, and listening to that internal voice. So as an extroverted leader, how can I use some of those introverted leader strengths myself to more fully develop in the leadership role? So we'll go through each of the 5 practices. So you've got an extrovert leader, introvert leader, sensing leader, intuition leader, judging leader, thinking leader, feeling leader, judging leader, and perceiving leader. So it will give you these lists on the Leadership Plus report. Okay. And what I have here is I've got some examples of exercises you can use that take model the way, for example, but you can use it in a way to where we're bringing in the Myers-Briggs and showing them how different personality types can effectively model the way. And they can see the strengths of the other personality types and use that strength to better develop their own style as well. For example, with Model the Way, as a suggestion, you can break them up into an introverted preference group and an extroverted preference group. Okay? So asking them what sorts of things convince you to follow a policy or a leader, and have them flip chart it down. What turns you off in a leader? What leadership qualities come naturally to your group? And then have them share with the other teams or other groups there. So introverts may need to be more overt in their expression of values, where extroverts may need to talk less and listen more. When it comes to inspire a shared vision, imagine that your leader is going to communicate the news of an organizational merger. How do you want to receive the news? What do you need to know about to be inspired? What things would convince you, and what would cause you to remain unconvinced? So this is a great exercise for breaking up into sensing and intuition to see what the strengths are for each one, preference, and the differences. Ends are good at visioning, but risk being too high in the sky sometimes. Sensing preference may be too focused on detail to see the big picture. When it comes to challenge the process, what categories most appeals to and defines your group and why? what tends to happen when it comes to the preferences is that you'll notice groups prefer efficiency, doing right things and doing them the right way. They may have a preference for refining ideas, doing things better, adopting ideas, doing things that others are doing. Let's take that, bring it here, and different ideas, doing things no one else is doing appeals more. And so they each bring different strengths. And if you're using this exercise as a facilitation, you can break them up into sensing judging groups. They prefer efficiency. Sensing perceiving groups, or SP, they prefer refining. Intuition and judging groups, which they tend to like adopting. And intuition and perceiving groups, they tend to like the different. And so they each bring a strength into challenging the process and learning from each other and listening on what strengths they bring and how the other groups can learn from them. The next one is enable others to act. And with this one in mind, this is about what strengths do we bring to leadership, what might we overdo as leaders, and what might we tend to overlook as leaders. Because what we're trying to get a look at is you might see that there might be some micromanagers in the group, which may tend to be an ST preference. Whereas when it comes to an S, they might have that preference to go out there and provide that, here, go do, but are they providing enough structure with that as well? Okay, so you can break them up into different groups depending upon what preferences you have on the team. With that in mind, but my favorite, of course, is the ST and the NF, the SF, and the NT. So that's intuition thinking, intuition feeling, sensing thinking, and sensing feeling. And last but not least is encourage the heart. How does your group like to be recognized and rewarded? And how does the current leadership provide recognition and reward? To what extent is there a match between the actual and the desired recognition? So this one can be done a couple of different ways. When it comes to extroversion and introversion, you'll see a difference with that group. And then, of course, feeling and thinking. With a feeling preference, they tend to be naturally good at just practice, and thinking preference can learn a little bit from that. And Kevin, gosh, we did this exercise with your group, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was actually my favorite part of the day. And I have to say I got a little biased because I went through it with what I consider one of the best facilitators I've ever had. So I've
thanks, Kevin.
yes. And it was great. So we went through it, and it was kind of an ideal situation. It was my team and my managers. So there's about 8 of us and 2 managers, and we go through and we're learning about more about leadership and the 360 feedback, and then our personality types. And we do these breakouts, and we get to encourage the heart. And all of a sudden, I'm on a side of the room in a little group with my manager. And we both have varying preferences for our personality types. And it was just so intriguing to be able to have such an open and honest discussion about how we like to be recognized and rewarded. I got to hear great insight on how they feel about it. And then we got to have a good discussion on how maybe some of us feel about it. And it was just a fantastic takeaway that I had been with the company a little over a year. And I felt like, one of the first times that I'd really been able to learn in such a way that was outside of my work setting, but it kind of, and it's maybe a little cliche, but it brought us together a little bit closer as a group. And it was just something fantastic that we've seen to be able to go forward from beyond that.
Thanks, Kevin. And we did wrap up a little quickly here, but we can go back through and take a look at what we've shared with you today. So in going back through it, when it comes to the 360 process, there's something that I just want to make sure that I was very clear with, and that is the implementation. So okay. So in the 360 assessment, choosing an assessment that has strong validity and reliability. is important for the organizational development, so that you have that credibility. Secondly, ensuring that the 360 observer rater has complete anonymity, and that there's no way that someone in HR or anyone can go back in and take a look at who has said what about them. And as Kevin pointed out earlier, when it comes to the LPI 360, there really isn't a reason for someone to find out who has said what specifically. Then enlisting senior management into the program, making sure you have a plan to train coaches, raters, observers on the system, as well as the feedback expectations. Mapping out your time frame when it comes to rolling out the training and when the feedback sessions will be. And setting that realistic expectation up front of what a 360 is there. It's designed to assist the organization to be more effective by developing our leaders. Okay? And specifically how it will do that is based upon the feedback. Using a one-year time frame to reassess. Okay, so, and frequently I've heard this as well, I can't wait to get my 360 this year because I want to see how well I'm doing. They want to know that information. And then linking the 360 to organizational models so that the employee has that buy-in, that understanding that, okay, what I'm doing well, I'm doing the right things, and this is going to make sure our company moves forward. And now I'll turn it over to Larry for the question and answer portion.
Great, thanks, Pam. We got a good set of questions here.
Great.
The first one is, I'm MBTI certified. Do I need to get LPI certified as well to use this tool?
Great question. No, you do not. Right, Kevin?
That is correct.
Yes. And the wonderful thing about the LPI 360 is that they have this amazing facilitator guide that makes it so quick and easy to use and understand. And I'm talking more about the facilitator's guide. Kevin, do you have any more that you want to add to that?
Sure. We have a great list of tools available for anybody who uses the LPI 360. And I like to say that for those who are MBTI certified and thinking about using this, through this partnership we have, it's been a fantastic relationship between those who have already been using it and seeing success. And what we've been able to do here is kind of with the LPI on our end in working with those at CTP and you as the customers in implementing this in a very successful fashion.
Great. Yes, you have. Thank you.
Yes, and I would like to mention that for those who would like to, see kind of a higher level who are using maybe the MBTI, they're certified, and they're doing the LPI, we have a pair of certification clinics coming up in next month in San Francisco, and then in January in Indianapolis. So there are different options available for those who wish to kind of have that varying level of experience.
Great, thanks Pam and Kevin. The next question is, what are the criteria for selecting raters, particularly in small organizations and or small departments?
Good question. And part of that is that you want to make sure that you have enough observers or raters so that the feedback information is anonymous. Correct, Kevin?
Yeah. And I will say that when it comes to thinking of how many observers to use, you ideally do not want to get in a situation where you might have a leader and 2 observers. That could be counterproductive to getting that full 360 feedback. And then also on that, that might be something more you encounter if you're working with executives or kind of one-on-one coaching. But then that's when you want to incorporate a little bit more 360 and kind of think outside the box on who could seek value in getting this feedback. Now on the flip side, you don't want to put in 50 observers. While it might seem ideal that the CEO, oh sure, that everybody in the company needs to get feedback on him, it may not be helpful, and it will definitely clutter the report and the data. We like to suggest somewhere between about 5 to 7, or maybe even 7 to 10 observers, depending on the situation. but it does get a little hectic sometimes if you're thinking of a small office environment and you want to get that full feedback, but you might be worried about there won't be enough servers or it won't be anonymous. Those situations are good when you can then also think about the fact that you're organizing who the observers are. In this program, you define them as managers, direct reports, coworkers, or others. So there are ways within the system to help protect people's anonymous feedback within those small settings.
Excellent, thank you. The next question states, my organization is resistant, so how best do I introduce the implementation of a 360 program? Please offer some tips.
Well, when it comes to resistance within an organization, it's really important to do some research on exactly what are they resistant to. Is there a low level of trust? Do they not trust that the system will be anonymous? Or are they concerned that this will not have benefit? So there's a couple of things, is making sure that research, the validity, the trust is there with the 360. And then just like we pulled up today, case studies are really important, not just from the HR research firms out there, but also I believe, Kevin, you have quite a few of these on the Leadership Challenge as far as how this tool has assisted an organization to be effective, correct?
Yes, and it's been very successful for customers to be able to see that we have a wide range of clients from very different industries who have seen success with this. And we've made sure to tell their story because their stories are worth told. And so if you need different industries, those are available.
And then additionally, when it comes to beginning the process, I always recommend an introductory session as high up as you can go, so that in a sense that somebody in your leadership team can try out the assessment and see for his or herself the effectiveness of the tool. Do you agree, Kevin?
Yeah, and I think that speaks a lot to what you were saying in the presentation about talking to the senior management, getting that kind of buy-in, showing them the value in that. So maybe thinking about finding out what the problems are, what are they resistant to, and taking it to the top and saying, well, let's just do a small executive session or one-on-one coaching. I want to show you what this feedback looks like and what it could mean for how we can go forward.
And once you have that leadership buy-in, it tends to make that resistance a lot less in the organization. What else you got for us, Larry?
We have several more here. The next one simply asks for, the person asks for a little more information about feedback expectations. It states, could you please talk to me more about feedback expectations from the 360?
Certainly. There are a couple of ways to provide feedback. One is, of course, the one-to-one coaching session, and then there's also a group feedback session in a sense that they're learning about what the 5 practices are and then how to apply them. So when it comes to that feedback, it's really important that if you're having your HR people provide that one-to-one feedback or managers providing that one-to-one feedback, that they have that training and understanding of what they're looking for on the 360 for developmental purposes, as well as, hey, you're doing a great job. Because some coaches will focus on this is what you're not doing well, while other coaches will focus on, hey, this is what you're doing great at. And when you're giving that kind of feedback, you want to focus on all areas. And you want to make sure that that feedback just is. There isn't a slant on it. But this is what we received, and now you as the person receiving the 360, what do you think about this, or how can we go forward from here? So there's a lot of understanding of the report, understanding of the 5 practices, that you want to make sure that's in place prior to doing one-to-one sessions with the HR or the managers, so that each individual employee has the best experience possible. And just like Kevin was saying, you're saying that there are actually clinics to assist the coaches with that, correct?
Yeah. And then kind of just to piggyback on you, because that's all some good stuff, to think about the expectations on that feedback. I was actually was able to sit in on a local HR event here yesterday morning that focused on the business impact of leadership development. And one of their big takeaways that they wanted to talk about was kind of like this question, the feedback expectations. And so they talked about not only understanding the data, but knowing how people can expect to develop from that. And what's unique about this is for people to understand, number one, that it is based on leadership frequencies and behaviors. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm a good leader or a bad leader. That's something that we encounter a lot of questions on. Someone says, well, I can't. I'm never around this person. There's no 0. I need to put a not applicable button in there. Well, our authors strongly believe that that's not really the case, that since this is based on leadership frequencies, that this is something that you have some level of frequency around that person. And so understanding what the actual assessment is focused on and the results that are coming in, and making sure that the participants have a good understanding of what that means can be very paramount to their development on this.
Okay, a couple of others here. The next one is, how can we try the LPI out in order to compare it to the other 360s we may be using, and is it available in Europe?
I just went ahead and forwarded onto the next slide, Larry, that has the thank you for the information for customer relations, and so that they can have that to connect. But Kevin, I'll let you take it from here.
Sure, yeah. Free trials are definitely a great way to take a look at anything that you're looking to use. And we highly suggest that you reach out to your CPP rep and through the channels listed there on your screen to get that. Very happy through our partnership to work with those at CPP and Pfeiffer to provide you a look to make sure that this is something that you want to even take a look at and see what it can do for you. And it is available globally also.
Great. Another question here is a 360 ever inappropriate?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think I've ever had that before. Kevin, do you have an answer to that?
Well, I guess the quick whipped answer would be yes, if you are your own boss and there's one person in the company. I mean, maybe you could have your dog be the observer, but that doesn't work. I think it's important that when you're thinking of 360 development, you can't, it's not just a stamp, you know, oh, yes, we need to do leadership development. The 360 is obviously going to be the best way. We just stamp it on there. Like we've been talking about, you have to look at the do's and the don'ts and whether this is something that's right for you. You know, we work with our clients and we help them understand and look at their problems and figure out what it is that they can do to achieve the results that they want to achieve. That's not always going to be a 360. Sometimes people will come in thinking they need a 360, and it ends up maybe they need to work a little bit more on team functions or you know, interpersonal relationships. And so I think it's a very delicate balance, but there are times when, yes, it could be inappropriate to use a 360.
Thank you. And this final question, just seeking some clarity, it is, does the LPI incorporate an actual interview with people, or is it information gathered via an online survey?
Well, it is an online survey, but it does provide the option to where you can implement your own questions, correct, Kevin?
Yes. So the whole nuts and bolts of that is that the LPI, like I mentioned, 30 set behavioral frequency statements on a 10-point Likert scale. Now, leaders and observers both go through those 30 questions. Leaders answer it on themselves. Observers answer it in relation to the frequencies with that leader. Then, as administrators using the LPI 360, you have the option, if you want to add up to 5 open-ended essay questions for all of the observers to respond on the leaders. So that's when you can take it beyond the 5 practices map it to a certain situation that's happening within a team or a company, or a lot of times clients like to use it mapping it to their organizational value statement. What's important to them as a company? What's in their foundation? How does this leader exemplify, our need to have a stress on customer service? And then observers can respond back on that. And all of that feedback is anonymous, even the manager.
Thank you. And we did get another question come in here, and it is in regards to the validity and reliability data on the LPI, where one may find that information, or can you speak to that information?
Of course. Our authors, Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner, they have a very high relationship with the data. And if on our website, leadershipchallenge.com, they have all of their information, research, case studies available. There is a fantastic academic article written by Barry about 10 years ago that if you look on there, it discusses the entire research, the validity, the history, the psychometric properties behind the LPI. It is, quite frankly, more data than one could ever hope to see in a lifetime. But for those interested, the numbers don't lie, and that's the thing about the LPI and the 360 aspect. So for those looking to get that, I urge you to, take a look over there, see that data. Take a look at what our authors have to say and what others have to say, because we do have all the data up there, ready to see, and always happy to talk about it.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin and Pam. Just as a reminder, everyone, the presentation will be emailed to all of you in about a week. To ensure that you receive it, I advise that you update or take a look at your email preferences, and to do so, please visit cpp.com/emailprefs. That's email, P-R-E-F-S. We've now come to the end of today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. Take this information and with it do great things, and have a great day. Thanks so much. Goodbye.